I think Hell's Angels are born. I don't think they're made. There's always...
I guess right out of the Marines, I guess I was just ready for a brotherhood trip. You know what I'm saying? Because Marine Corps, you know, teaches about brotherhood. You know what I'm saying? They brought me down.
The Hell's Angels come around Santa Rosa. He says, well, we got a charter now. I told him, I said, well, why don't you take me to Mino and join?
Yeah, they knew that there was a big plan to jump Hell's wrong.
You don't tell any person. They're going to shell out.
You know, you don't never remember the hard times, man, because the good times is...
As a sign of what the Hells Angels later became after the Lennoxville Purge, and they
yeah, and they started in. There was a busload of people from Ulster that came down.
And then he goes, Bill, you can stay. Bill, take it off. Bill.
Yves Trudeau, also known as Apache and the Mad Bomber, was a Canadian outlaw biker, gangster, and contract slayer. A former member of the Hells Angels North chapter in Laval, Quebec, Trudeau was the club's leading assassin and a major participant in multiple biker conflicts throughout Canadian history, including the Popeyes Devil's Disciplines War, the Satan's Choice Popeyes War, and the First Biker War. Background of bike culture in Quebec. Quebec went through a period known as the Grande Noircure, also called the Great Darkness, from 1936 to 1960. It was a time when ultra-conservative Catholic Union Nationale Party ruled Quebec. The Quebec society was very conservative and was among the most conservative societies in North America. However, things changed after the 1960 provincial election, when the Union Nationale was defeated by the Quebec Liberals, and Quebec experienced sweeping changes known as the Quiet Revolution. In just a decade, Quebec went from being one of the most conservative societies in North America to one of the most liberal. The changes that came with the Quiet Revolution were a reaction against the medieval Catholic social mores of the Grande Noircure. Quebec embraced a culture of hedonism, with a significantly higher rate of illegitimate births and drug use than English Canada. Outlaw motorcycle clubs also became very popular in Quebec in the 1960s, as French-Canadian young men saw the outlaw biker culture as a symbol of freedom, rebellion, and machismo. By 1968, La Belle Province had 350 outlaw biker clubs. However, the popularity of outlaw biker clubs in Quebec came with a degree of violence and viciousness that had no parallel in the rest of Canada. With too many clubs seeking their share of the organized crime rackets, there were conflicts between different biker groups, giving Quebec the reputation as the red zone in the outlaw biker world. The crime journalist James Dubrow stated that there had always been more violence in Quebec, and even the outlaw's hitman was scared to go to Montreal. Popeyes Moto Club. Yves Trudeau's Popeyes Moto Club was notorious for being Quebec's most violent outlaw biker gang, notorious for engaging in gruesome acts of violence. Their reputation for gratuitous brutality caught the eye of the Hells Angels, leading to the transformation into Canada's first Hells Angels chapter. The Popeyes were also the go-to hitmen for the Montreal Mafia, carrying out cold-blooded slayings on their behalf. When Yves Trudeau joined the Popeye Moto Club in 1968, little did anyone know that he would become one of the most infamous contract killers in Canada. In 1975, the Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club forged an alliance with the American Outlaws Motorcycle Club, leading to an intense rivalry with the Popeyes, the Hells Angels-backed club that ruled Quebec's underworld. As the Popeyes targeted the Devil's Disciplines biker gang in 1974, Trudeau emerged as their ace assassin. He had a fascination for bombs and took a job with an explosives factory to master his craft. He was meticulous and professional, and that's why his services were in high demand. He even scalped one of his victims, earning him the nickname Apache. By January 1976, the Popeyes had complete control over St. Henry Square, and Trudeau had cemented his position as one of Canada's most feared hitmen. In the winter of '78, the biker world was shattered to its core. A vicious brawl erupted between the notorious Hells Angels and their bitter rivals, the Outlaws. The night ended in tragedy when a green car pulled up and opened fire on the Outlaws, ending one's life and injuring another. And behind the wheel, none other than one of the founding members of the Hells Angels in Quebec, Trudeau himself. As the years went by, the Hells Angels only grew in power and influence. In '79, their national presidents made a bold move, breaking up the Montreal chapter in two. Trudeau found himself assigned to the North chapter, a wild and reckless group known for their excessive drug use and volatile behavior.
I guess right out of the Marines, I guess I was just ready for a brotherhood trip. You know what I'm saying? Because Marine Corps, you know, teaches about brotherhood. You know what I'm saying? They brought me down.
The judge, you got the most precious damn thing ever seen in my life. Equal, they ain't
A society where I can turn around and trust whoever I'm with. The Hells Angels come around Santa Rosa. He says, well, we got a charter now. I told him, I said, well, why don't you take me to Mino and join?
I was prospect, and I went for the guy who had the gun, and I got voted the next day, you know?
They got him charged with he's going to do time on what everybody thinks he did, you know what I mean?
We don't really have rights.
There are approximately 100 to 200.
Yeah, they knew that there was a big plan to jump Hell's.
They were a far cry from the more disciplined South chapter, who had men who joined the Angels after 1977. But with the slayings of the national president by the Outlaws in '83, things took a turn for the worse. Rules governing drug use were ignored, and the North chapter, already prone to violence, spiraled out of control under their new leader, Viao. It seemed there was no stopping the Hells Angels and their lust for power. He was the last person you'd expect to be a ruthless enforcer for the Hells Angels. Standing at just 5'6" and 135 pounds, with a clean-shaven face and short hair, Trudeau didn't fit the stereotypical biker image. But don't be fooled by appearances. He was the club's most prolific slayer. While other Angels towered over him at 6 foot and weighed between 300 and 400 pounds, Trudeau was the primary weapon. He worked closely with the West End Gang, a powerful Irish-Canadian group that controlled the Port of Montreal and the drug trade in Quebec. They frequently called upon Trudeau to take out their rivals, and he never hesitated to get the job done. In fact, Trudeau admitted to slaying a staggering 43 people between 1970 and 1985. He was even awarded the Filthy Few Patch, a gruesome badge allegedly given to members who had slayed for the club. During the Hells Angels' brutal war with the Outlaws over control of Montreal's drug trade, Trudeau was responsible for taking out 18 of the 23 outlaws slayed in the conflict. To assist with his slayings, Trudeau turned to cocaine. It helped him become a more efficient slaying machine. But behind the facade of a cold-blooded slayer, Trudeau had no conscience and no respect for human life. He was a psychopathic slayer, feared by all who crossed his path.
There was only 20 Hells Angels there, and there was over 2,000 outlaw bike clubs invited to that run, you know?
We're wrong. You don't tell any person. They're going to shell out. I know. Hey, you know what? We don't want nobody fucking even considered to be a Hells Angel that's going to turn puncher. You're doing it. That's why we have a lot of hats with other fucking old ladies and strong bottles through windows. You know, something we don't do. That ain't showing class. To me, showing class is somebody fucking standing in front of a fucking...
You know, you don't never remember the hard times, man, because the good times is so important.
I mean, they're all sleazy, but we gotta get the nicer looking sleazy.
The hard, the hard. When we get lost by, we heard them. You know, we just ain't street fighters. We're above that.
If you remember in the Cleveland situation, approximately 24 angels.
The feds, man, they knew they had, it was set, brought up in court. I mean, we would, you know, hey, we would have made the odds so even, would have wiped them all out. Still with 24 Hells Angels.
You heard about giving shots? Hey, you check that mother when it's in.
Club and shit. That's why we pull patches. Like, a lot of people don't understand that. But why did they go tear somebody's jacket up? Because, like, somebody come by with a...
Lennoxville Massacre. Trudeau was the Hells Angels' most prolific hitman, but even he was not immune to greed. In 1985, West End Gang chieftain Alan the Weasel Ross offered him $200,000 to eliminate his predecessor slayers. Trudeau was paid $25,000 in advance, but when he tried to collect the rest of the money after ending 2 men's life, Ross told him to get it from the Hells Angels Halifax and Sorrel chapters. The Halifax chapter's president, David Wolf Carroll, paid Trudeau $98,000, but he soon learned that Trudeau had used some of the money to support his cocaine addiction. Trudeau's theft from the Halifax chapter only added to the resentment many Hells Angels already felt towards members of the North chapter. They were considered too wild and uncontrollable, often using drugs they were supposed to sell and cheating other chapters out of drug profits. The decision was made to liquidate the North chapter in what would become known as the Lennoxville Massacre.
The Hells Angels decided we're going to become businessmen as opposed to just being rowdy bikers and then partying all weekend with coke and women. And but by 1982, that as a sign of what the Hells Angels later became after the Lennoxville Purge, and the attitude had somehow changed them. 1985, they were involved in such high-level drug dealing, very much more business-like group afterwards, and the members who were recruited into it.
Trudeau was supposed to be at the meeting in Lennoxville on March 24, 1985, where 5 members of the North chapter were shot and dumped in the St. Lawrence River. But he had enrolled in a detox program the week before. News of the massacre reached him at the center, and he received a visit from the Montreal chapter representative who told him he was out of the club and would have to have his tattoos removed.
Yes, sir.
How's it going?
Good, good.
You have some complaints on your festivities.
What's that?
Flattering.
You guys got my ring on, man.
Yeah, and they started in. There was a busload of people from Ulster that came down. You know?
know what I mean? If I was, you know, that's what I think. But I mean, I don't like to say nothing because I feel...
They're nice guys, but they can be a tough bunch of bastards. Don't get me wrong.
I want to see it.
Come in.
Just come over here, son. Time, it was the elite of its core.
Understand? We're not going to take that in the night.
They're going to take that down the road back.
Crown witness. For Yves Apache Trudeau, one of the club's most feared enforcers, the end was drawing near. After being released from a detox center, Trudeau discovered that the Hells Angels had taken back his motorcycle and $46,000 in cash that belonged to him. The only way he could get them back was to slay 2 people for the gang. He succeeded in slaying one of the targets, and the Hells Angels returned his motorcycle. But Trudeau knew that his days were numbered. The Hells Angels had put a $50,000 contract on his head, and he decided to become a police informant and government witness. In 1985, Trudeau pleaded guilty to 43 counts of manslaughter. He claimed that he didn't intentionally slay his 43 victims, but the Crown had a different view. They estimated that 30 to 35 of his victims were other motorcycle gang members or sympathizers. Trudeau also testified on 40 other homicides and 15 attempted homicides, but the plea bargain the Crown reached with Trudeau was controversial. Some, like Conservative Senator Pierre Hugues-Boisvenu, believed that the deal was too lenient. As part of his contract with the government, Trudeau was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole in 7 years. He was also given $40,000 over the next 4 years and about $35 a week for cigarettes. The organized crime world is strange. It's a world where violence and betrayal are everyday occurrences, and where there are no second chances. But in the end, Trudeau chose to turn his back on that world and seek redemption through his cooperation with the authorities. It's a decision that may have saved his life, but at a cost that he would have to live with for the rest of his days. And that's all for this video, folks. See you next time.